Hello everyone, this is Sol. It's a little late and I'm stepping in for Boaz, who got his dates wrong. And well, Linda said if I had anything to talk about, and I always have something to talk about, and tonight I want to talk about death. I recently came home from a marvelous conference in England, and I got the opportunity to talk not just about death, but also about midlife crisis. And these two subjects, they belong together because it's very odd with life. It seems that we go from death begins with birth, as easy as that, even though that sounds a little gloomy. I think life is a constant shedding of skin. It's a constant dying in many ways. It's always this relationship we have to the past that is continuously, it's dying a little bit. So therefore, death is an immensely interesting subject. And I thought I'd share just a little bit of what I've shared with the people in England in relation to this particularly juicy subject. And we go into astrology with the hope of finding ourselves, with the hope of finding answers to some curious karmic riddle that we seem to be carrying in the depth of our souls, and we want to explore how we could make and create a life that is deeply functional, a life that is in accordance with our deepest soul yearning. And this is quite a task. It demands a lot of consciousness, and through astrology we gain consciousness. Now there's always a danger with consciousness, not because consciousness itself is dangerous, but we don't quite know how to deal with it. When you see everything, when the veil is gone, how do you deal with the knowledge and the information that you suddenly get access to? This is something that we might see in different esoteric traditions, like, for instance, in the yoga philosophy, we have this concept called Kundalini Rising, which is quite misunderstood, but the real Kundalini Rising is when the veil is gone, the veil that separates the different dimensions from each other. Now, if we had no veil, we would see life and death as one. There is nothing but it, the one life. And since we have a veil, since we have to cross over the river of Styx when we get back into incarnation again, and we have to cross over in the river of forgetting when we return to life again, we tend to forget that we have been dead in a way. And it is quite, there's a reason why we forget it, because if you had this full Kundalini Rising and you saw everything, very few people could handle it. So I will share with you the PowerPoint that I made for, that's not it, share screen for this particular meeting so that we can have something to put our little eyes on while I'm talking. And technical. We start from here. All right. So if there's any problems with this, if you can't see this screen, please just let me know. Death. It is a controversial subject in astrology, mostly because it is so, we don't know what death is. And it's because we forgot it. And it is a dimension of life that is beyond control. Death is always around. This is something I learned when my brother died. He was there one moment and the next moment he was gone. And it was incredible, the experience of powerlessness that I felt when I faced death, when death came into my life and took away something that I loved dearly. I could not get him back, no matter how much I tried. So death was rather beyond compromise and beyond control. And there is this feeling like something's just gone. It just evaporated. And due to this, suddenness and due to this uncontrollable nature of death, we tend to go into fear when we look at astrology and we look at death. There are many stories about people who have been trying to see their own death moment in the chart. And this is impossible because life consists of choices. And every choice you make it's like a labyrinth. You either move into a dead zone, like you can't get further down one path, or you get further into the labyrinth. Eventually you find the center, you find the place which is the goal, if there's any such thing. And death is therefore also something that is very difficult to talk about in astrology because it can easily scare people. Sometimes you see when people have a difficult Mars transit, they get into and they know a little bit of astrology, which is again this point that consciousness is not always easy to handle. The consciousness of astrology is it's a strong and powerful consciousness. We know that, all right, I will come to a crossroad. Mars will cross my sun, for instance, and I'm traveling. Now, could that be a good thing? I remember I almost broke my foot earlier this summer, and I was looking at the chart, and Mars was exactly opposing my sun, and it squared my Mars because I'm born with the Sun-Mars square, which could easily denote early death. Not that I intend to go early, I intend to be 120. But still, I looked at the chart before I went into the forest with my kid. We were going into the woods and just for a walk, and I thought, everything went very quickly. I wonder what that transit's going to bring. And it brought me a broken ankle, almost a very severely damaged ankle for sure. So, I could not judge the moment. I saw something was happening, but I could not quite see what it was. And I was lucky, of course. There are many ways Mars in a stressful aspect to the sun can manifest. And the least common of it is actually death. It's more like, oh, I cut my finger. And same crisis you can sometimes see when people are relating to Mercury retrograde, for instance, or they're having some other deep transits in their chart, like the infamous Pluto transits, like, oh, that's like really heavy transits. And they're not all bad. It's, we don't know when we're going to die. And this is very important point to get through when we want to explore death from an astrological point of view. People fear dying, not exactly, they don't fear death itself. There's nothing to fear. It's like a big sleep. You actually died a little bit when you went to sleep last night, but you woke up again, but you have no idea where you were. You were completely disembodied. You could not feel your body when you were sleeping. You don't know where you were. It's completely nothing. But what we fear mostly is dying. It is how we're going to leave the planet. That's the big thing for a lot of people, like illnesses, medications, accidents. It's something painful. Like we associate death with pain. And today we see a society which is not treating death with dignity. We don't have a tradition like they have in Tibet, where they actually have conversations about death, which would be very helpful for us to gain a clearer picture of what death might be. We don't know yet, do we? And I must say, my brother died it's almost 17 years now. And it catapulted a big journey for me in terms of understanding death. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. We deal with reincarnation all the time, but we toss it out like it was something, like it's a verb, like it's just a word, but it's not. When we say it as if it was a fact, but rarely people know what it is. We don't know for sure what it is. What we know is that we're born with a chart, and this chart has certain signatures, astrological signatures, and we can see that there's been something, like there was moments before this birth. A square to Mars was the sun earlier would make a trine to Mars. That would be just, a week before I was born, right? No, excuse me, a month before I was born. So, something happened before I came into incarnation. So there's this implicit before in an astrological chart. There is something before. Otherwise, all your aspects would be just simply random, and why bother reading the chart anyway? And that's like the foundation of evolutionary astrology. Something came before. So it is, this is something I just went through, the ethical rules of the astrologer. When we deal with this, both the karmic subjects, I think that's something we cannot take too lightly, like, oh, I see you were a soldier in your past life. I mean, there is something we need to pay attention to, how we word ourselves when we want to approach clients, for instance. There is a certain ethic that we need to take into consideration when we deal with both karmic issues and death. I see you died a violent death in a previous lifetime. I often hear people say, oh yes, you killed him in a previous lifetime. That's why you have this karma with this person in this lifetime. It could be true. I'm not to judge. Some people might be extremely clairvoyant and actually have the ability to see this. But through the actual astrological signature, we get some hints of how we dealt with certain archetypal energies. And that's how far we can stretch ourselves in terms of interpreting things that came from the past. We can interpret the abstracts, but we don't necessarily have to translate them into something concrete. If we just can get the energy, get a hold of the energy, then we can actually provide something of value to the client. They don't have to necessarily know that they died like this in a previous lifetime. They might have to know perhaps that, all right, you came in with a lot of unresolved anger, for instance, due to something that seems to have been unfair. You carry this deep sense of injustice in you. Let's say a person came in and he has Mars conjunct the South Node, which might indicate that someone was killed very, very abruptly or died too early, or there are many interpretations to this. But what the client mostly experiences is this residue of anger that is lingering in their subconscious. Now that's helpful to talk about. Ska vi se. Get this thing going. Oh, I have to stop the share. It just stopped. I'm sorry. Well, let's try again. Oh, it's probably my computer. I have 300 and zillion things up. I forgot to clean it before we started. Oh, yeah, here we go. All right, so death and life. So we have a birth chart and we have a death chart. And then we have what's in between. And then we have reincarnation. And my dear Maurice Fernandez wrote something incredibly genius about the symbols of the chart. Each symbol in the chart has multiple layers describing simultaneously the past, the present, and the potential future of the person. This is a very important sentence to meditate on if you want to understand the depth of karma in anyone's chart, because every symbol carries the past, the present, and the potential future. And reincarnation is a very nebulous subject because, there are things, what is it that we actually can remember? Does it come through genetics? Is it our genes that remember things? I mean, like I had a crazy uncle who went to the United States, and therefore I'm born with this incredible rebellious streak that I can see in my Uranus position or my Uranus placement in my chart, for instance. We don't know. I normally, when I meet skeptics and they're like, so this reincarnation woo, they call it woo. What is that about? And I normally just answer pretty scientifically when they approach me. I say, well, you have genetics and then you have epigenetics and that's it. You don't have to explain anything else. For me, it's a little different. I come from a Tibetan Buddhist approach to it. So I believe really that we have, it's more than genetics. Genetics is more like a secondary manifestation of an impulse that lies in a deeper field of consciousness. That starts on a more subtle energetic field, and it manifests as genetics. So what we know is that we're born with certain aspects, and as we evolve, we hopefully manage our core aspect. We see in the red lines, the squares and the oppositions. These are the real formation aspects of a chart. It's really where we really work a lot to manage the energy functionally, to make and create a functional operating energy. You have the inconjuncts, for instance, the yod. There are many challenging aspects. The conjunctions can also be very difficult to manage or regulate. We want to become one functioning whole so that our souls can express its gift through us. And when we die, the most interesting thing is when you start studying death charts is that you see a lot of these aspects repeated. A person can be born with Sun-Mars conjunction and die with the Sun-Mars square. It can be born with a Moon-Saturn opposition and die with a Moon-Saturn trine. It is always like you will find these resonances. Like there's a resonance between the death chart and the birth chart. So it's quite impossible to point at one planet and say, that's the planet of death. It could be anything. It could be any planet. It could be Jupiter. Many times, I remember we've studied quite a few death charts during both when I studied and afterwards as well. And it's always like, oh, Jupiter is here. That's interesting. Why these wonderful Jupiter-Venus transits? You can say that transits to a death chart more describes the energy in which a person dies more than their death aspects. They're just another aspect, just another transit. When the soul decided to pull away and withdraw its capacity to hold life away from the persona, away from the body, that's when a person dies. And these transits are merely triggers. So I'd go as far as say the death chart is a new birth chart. And this is a guy I really like. He's a little wordy for me, but he has these snippets of fabulous wisdom. His name is Ken Wilber, and he's Aquarian, of course, I'd like to say. He's the head of the Integral Institute, which is sort of like it's an institute which, in a very Aquarian way, found a niche between science and spirituality. Now, Wilber is an avid Buddhist. He's also into the deep Tibetan stuff. And he was married to a wife. No, he had a wife called Treya. They got together in the 80s. And just a month before they were to marry, which happened quite quickly, they decided to marry. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and they were married for 5 years, and the entire marriage was her death process. And therefore, he spent quite a bit of time, we'll see his chart afterwards, he spent quite a bit of time delving into the subject of death, naturally, and he wrote a book about her death process, which I haven't read in its entirety yet, but it's all about the spiritual challenges that we face when dying, faced with this unknown. Here's a little snippet from an excellent article he wrote about death. It is very difficult to support the idea of reincarnation appealing to evidence in the form of alleged past life memories, because in most cases, these can be shown to be only a revival of subconscious memory trace from this life. It's like we dress up our abstract, I will just use a word here, energy, like you have like an abstract energy memory somewhere in your field, And when you go into, for instance, let's say regression therapy, the energy is real. This is like, you can have like a panicky energy, like an anxiety, like a post-traumatic stress disorder that just comes in and you don't know where it's from because you cannot put it in this life. There is nothing you can put into this life particularly. But you have your narrative that you experienced. We have memory when we live. We have memory and associations. And if we go into regression therapy, we activate this energy again. But I believe truly that the associations that we put on these regressive memories are actually almost like it becomes like a mosaic of our associative thinking. We create, it's associative. It's like it reminds us of something. So it could be something we read, or we have like an association to something. And it does not mean that the memories aren't real, but we can't be 100% sure. And it's mostly because what happens when we die. For example, body dissolving into mind, this is Ken Wilber again, is the actual process of physical death. Mind dissolving into soul is experienced as review and judgment of one's life. Soul dissolving into spirit is a radical release and transcendence. Then the process reverses, so to speak. And based upon one's accumulated karmic tendencies, one generates a soul out of spirit, then a mind out of soul, then a body out of mind, whereupon one forgets all the previous steps and finds oneself reborn in a physical body. This is exactly what Plato describes. How do we get back? When we get back, we cross the river of forgetting. We forget everything. According to the Tibetans, the whole process takes about 49 days. Now, there are stories of those who, really remembers. And I remember Maurice did a case study about a young boy in the United States who had this vivid experiences of being a pilot in the Second World War for the Japanese. And he went back to the place where he died, and, he had a great emotional release. And, we cannot be 100% sure, but most of us, I think, forget, and we're supposed to forget. We're supposed to let go. So it's a little nebulous, this subject. Mm-hmm. But this is very interesting what he says here. First, it's the repository of one's virtue or lack thereof, that is, of one's karma, both good and bad. Second, it's one's strength of awareness of one's capacity to witness the phenomenal world without attachment or aversion. This capacity is also known as wisdom. The accumulation of these two, virtue and wisdom, constitutes the soul, which is the only thing that transmigrates. Virtue and wisdom. So you remember your virtues and you remember your wisdom. Now, I like that. Wisdom is like this. When you say somebody's very old, like this is an old soul. Yeah, you come in with a lot of experience being human. I know this, like you're a little old, like a Benjamin Button, born old. And the virtues or lack of thereof, it's the karmas. It's what we need to, the lack of thereof, it's like this, I don't want to call it bad karma, but it's these things that we feel we need to find other solutions to. Like there's just these subconscious compulsive habits that we have sometimes. It's just habits. Karma is habit. Oh, I crossed this road in this manner a million times before. I'm not going to change, right? Changing the karma is changing that path. And it's moving beyond the security zone. And this is exactly what the Pluto transit triggers in us. And it can definitely, a Pluto transit, trigger a lot of these subconscious abstract memories of something very familiar, yet quite abstract. It's just something that's there. And we can recognize it as something very, very familiar. This is the South Node. It's Pluto. It's very, very familiar stuff for us. Now, this is the chart of Ken Wilber, actually, when his wife died. And I thought we could just look at some of these aspects. I mean, it's not him dying, but a part of him is dying, right? He loved her very, very much. And I think, the impression that I got after studying his, life a little bit, not that I went into great length to do this, but I studied some of his life, yes, and I think this was the love of his life. He really, truly, it was true love. And he is born with Juno in the 7th house on the North Node, this little thing with the hairy little thing here. That's Juno. Juno is it's the asteroid of marriage. We call it very lightly. We could say it's the asteroid of marriage. It's much more than that, of course. And he has it, he's born with Juno on the North Node in Aries in the 7th house. And at the moment of Treya's death, Mars is there. She died. She's leaving him. He's separated. Mars is a planet of separation. Now, the Juno was in transit at that time on, you can see the nodal axis is on his south node, in transit to his south node. So he's going through a major transition in his life. This is the key word for Saturn. When it comes to death as well, if it's yours or if it's someone else's, if Saturn is active, it's a major transition for you. It's a major maturing. It's really growing up. Death can really make you come alive. Now I had to let go of my brother, for instance. The first thing I thought of was, now Sol, now's the time for you to really live. It's incredible how many people are just here and they're not living. They're just, I don't know what they're doing, waiting for something to come and save them. And that's why I think perhaps we're afraid of dying, because we don't really live. So he's really growing up now, Ken Wilber, huh? And the resonance is there. Juno is on the nodal axis. There's also this little thing, it's called Vesta. And that's also interesting. He has a very interesting Vesta Chiron conjunction in Sagittarius, which is definitely the spiritual seeker. It's he's definitely looking to find what's beyond the sea of the mind, what's beyond the mind. That's what he's looking for. And that's very rare for an Aquarian with 3 planets in Aquarius and Mercury retrograde in Aquarius. It's very mental, it's very in the mind. But with this Chiron Vesta conjunction in Sagittarius, is really opening up to some energetic understanding of life. Now, Vesta in a death chart, we will, if we have time, we will see this in a couple of other charts as well that I brought in, is often a signature that, death is peaceful. There is sacredness around death. Like, this moment is sacred. It's a holy moment. If we could approach death as a holy moment, just as birth is a holy moment, we celebrate birth, right? Yes, it's a boy, it's a girl, they'll welcome to the world. And the little boy or girl comes kicking and screaming. But we're celebrating. Now imagine the tired soul going to bed, fighting battles and finally surrendering. It's a victory, huh? It's a victory to let go of life and embrace death. That's the approach we should have to death in our society. Alas, it's not like that, due to this very strange phenomenon called attachment. Now, Vesta is a sacred principle. She knows that I'm always there. I'm one with it. And it's a very deep symbol in his chart. He's really opening up to the spiritual realm. Maybe he had a very deep spiritual experience when she died. Neptune is also on his, Neptune and Saturn is embracing his IC. So he's really it's a very intense death chart. And look, the Sun is on his Jupiter and Venus. So there again, we have Jupiter and the Moon. I mean, everything is cooking in this chart for this particular moment. So it's really when everything is on fire in a person's chart, we know that the energy is on. This is it. Oh, here's Louise Hay. She died recently. I was very, I saw this, before the eclipse started. This is her birth chart, by the way. I will just point this. This is the birth chart of Louise Hay. And you can see her Neptune is 26 degrees Leo. And the eclipse degree was 28, right? 28, 29. But it's in the vicinity, so it's definitely something, the eclipse hit her. And a few days later, she died. 30th of August. She peacefully, died. She died in peace. She was quite old. She had the gift of being able to experience a life that was, I would say, a good flow. Even though you can see on her chart, she actually came from a background that wasn't always that good. Pluto squares her moon. Pluto is on the North Node. And it's evident that she had gone through quite a bit of emotional turmoil and transformation and abuse in her earlier days. Energies that she managed to transform and managed to rise above. And you can see this. There is no aspect between Pluto and, this is her death chart, between Pluto and the moon in her death chart. So she resolved this Pluto moon energy, and instead she dies with moon Saturn energy, which is more like taking responsibility. It's in Sagittarius. I found my faith. I found my truth. I found my freedom. That's a nice word for Sagittarius. And I think she indeed was a happy woman when she died. If this chart was left without ever working on herself, this might have been different, right? She might have been dying with this aspect. And see also, she's born with Neptune in the first house, which is quite like, no boundaries, like it could be prone to abuse. It's the Mars house, right? Her Mars is retrograde in Taurus, which means she has quite a lot of stamina, but it's also retrograde. So it means it's on and off. It functions sometimes and then it doesn't. I know there was some sexual abuse in her life. And she has a wide square between Neptune and Mars in her birth chart, which means that, with Mars Neptune, you can have problems saying no to people. You can have problems setting up good boundaries. There can be this incestuous energy going on, like something is really invading your private space or invading your boundaries. Now she dies with, she dies with quite a different Mars energy, and it's pretty powerful. It's crossing her Neptune actually, but it is on the North Node, so she goes out with a lot of fire. She found her power. She found her fire, and it's an interesting switch. It's an interesting evolution, because that's what she's gone through, an evolution. Your life is evolving now. Tomorrow you can make completely different choices and life can completely change. And you can live till you're 90 and you can still smile even though you went through hell when you were a kid. Now this particular eclipse was interesting. We had a couple of deaths in our family as well. Actually, no, I talk about it as if it was something everyday like, but it wasn't very close to me. Of course I felt it, but I noticed that in the weeks before this eclipse, like some wave of death came, and Pluto opposed Ceres at 17 degrees Capricorn Cancer for this eclipse. So the whole period that the eclipse started will have these themes of death going on. Now, both symbolically and of course literally. But mostly symbolically. Now it's not going to be so long until Jupiter enters into Scorpio as well, further strengthening this need to maybe talk about death, understand death, and, really learn how to dare to let go of whatever attachments are meant to be released. It's dead. Let it go. There's no more emotional energy in this. Let it go. That's how the soul creates. Oh, there's no use. The body is just like milk. It has an expiration date. I can't use this body anymore. I can't work through this old thing, the soul says, and it withdraws its energy. And I remember studying for healing many, many years ago. I've been studying healing for many, many years. And this book that I've read, and it was the healer talking, and she wrote, sometimes death is the only healing available. The body is beyond repair. It's a very kairotic thing. It's chiron. Yeah, it's just, that's it. So if you can't repair everything, you're not God. If an egg breaks, the second law of thermodynamics states that you cannot glue it together and it will be the same egg. No. Yes, well, Louise Hay had a very nice death chart for sure. You can see here is Ceres, it's opposing Pluto, 17, it's 20 degrees now, right? And she dies with Ceres on the midheaven. Well, excuse me, no, the death chart doesn't have a time, I'm sorry. She's born with Sun Ceres. She has a lot of these deep moon issues in her chart, But she dies not with Sun Ceres. This too was resolved. That's good. That's really good. So, but here's the death chart. So the most stunning ones are, of course, Uranus conjunct Chiron natally and Chiron conjunct Uranus. It's difficult to interpret. This is a deep soul, a spiritual kind of energy, but it's just that Chiron kind of, peaceful kind of, yes, I accept death. She dies with Venus on her ascendant, which is also very beautiful. Yeah, she's surrounded by those she loves. She carried the love in her heart. But look at Vesta return. She dies with a Vesta return. I found that to be the most beautiful of all the aspects in her chart for this death chart. It's that sense of peace. It's just this beautiful peace. Yes, I'm ready now to meet the Creator. And I'm sure, I remember my ex-mother-in-law died a couple of years ago. She was only 59. It's cancer. She had this ongoing cancer thing going on. And finally, she had peace. I mean, she decided the last year that she lived, she wanted to travel with a cruise liner that went all the way through the coast of Norway, all the way up to the North Cape and back again. And she got to see the midnight sun and things that she really dreamt of during her lifetime. She did her bucket list the last year she was here on Earth. And I remember her moment of death. I was not with her present, but there was just feeling of, I was writing and I was disturbed by this beautiful energy. It was like a white light that just came through me, and it was like 100 angels singing. It's the only way I can describe it. And there was this feeling of victory in the voice. It was, yes, I did it. Dying through cancer is quite painful, right? And releasing that tension. Imagine what gift it is to the soul. She died with Sun conjunct her Neptune. And it's the same, Neptune and Vesta, they carry a little bit of the same kind of flair. It's the same kind of energy. It has that softness. And Louise Hay, she dies with Sun opposing Neptune as well. Mars is on her Neptune. There are these Neptune energies that comes in through her death as well. So I think she had a nice time and a nice death. The moon in the death chart is very interesting because the moon is, it carries these deep family patterns and behaviors, these comfort zone things. Now, I guess, Linda, you will tell me, I can just continue this one another time, but I guess you will tell me when I'm when the time is up.
Yes. Yes,
Well,
Sol. How about another 5 minutes?
sure. I'll go through this moon chart and then we can continue. We can pick up the thread next time. So the moon in the death chart is these family patterns and behaviors, our tendencies, our security needs, and it's our emotional development. And the placement of the moon in the death chart shows the development of these themes during the lifetime lived and how we resolved our own emotional issues. Now we can just take it very quickly. The Yeats, the poet, he was born, this is his birth chart, with moon Aries opposing Mars, squaring Pluto, Venus. If you know a little bit about Yeats, you'd know that he was obsessed with this woman he could never get, and she was his muse. But she refused to go to bed with him. She refused to marry him. He also lived a life as a poor artist. He never had enough money. Now, eventually, all these themes in his life of money and women were resolved. He finally found somebody to marry. He also found another muse, like he had to go through this not getting the one that he really loved kind of scenario in his life. And you can see he's quite obsessive when it comes to his emotional attachments, Pluto, Venus. And the moon is here too, so this woman thing is quite deep in his chart. Now, when he dies actually with this kind of conjunction in Taurus, Moon, Ceres, Uranus. Yeah, it shows that he sort of released. Actually, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature a couple of years before he died, and he was able to finish off his debts. He even paid his father's debts. And look at that Venus. It's free. It does not have the same, well, it carries a little bit of the same kind of romance that he was obsessively deluded by, but he's a poet. He made a lot of great poetry through this. And to skulle Lisa. Yeah, det är greit. My daughter is here. So but at least he managed to resolve a lot of these issues, and his death chart is pretty interesting in this sense that he died with his muse by his side, and an elderly woman that he loved very dearly, who was a certain wisdom keeper for him, and he died with his wife there, not the love of his life, but nonetheless a woman he managed to create a life with. So his moon in Taurus shows that this very airy kind of moon in Aquarius found some deeper grounding, although he still carried this signature of the outsider, the moon Uranus. He is born with moon in Aquarius and dies with moon Uranus. It's kind of like the same archetypal theme there, but it is a different kind of energy. And you see that this particular theme of moon Venus is developed, especially thanks to the Venus placement here. It's a freer Venus. So I guess he died more happily. All right. Well, I guess that's it for today. I hope you got something out of this rather spontaneous death.
Great.
Death thing.
Thank you so much, Sol. Could you please click on stop share at the top?
Yep, I can do it.
Great. Thank you so much for filling in with very little notice. And so any comments from anybody?
Yeah. Hi, girl.
Hello, Mariam. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Dying and living. And actually, thank you so much for that. That is amazing. Like, just actually seeing those the birth and the death charts for me was very comforting, because to me it says like the more you consciously work with what you have, the more you can see the results in the at the moment of movement, from one from the body to another type of energy. See how if you actually like consciously engage with your own chart and with your own karmic things that you bring in, the more you can actually see evidently that it doesn't have to be difficult, you know, and yeah, and you can choose. I mean, we're dying pretty much not every day, but like pretty frequently. We are having to die through our experiences, you know, or not, or we can choose not to. But I think that this just makes it so much easier, you know, to see that, yes, you know, it's difficult. There are many difficult things. Death is not the only most difficult thing. I mean, that's why we're constantly dying. But the more you engage with the energy, the easier it's going to flow. You know, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to get stuck in this difficult place. So that was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you thought so. I mean, dying is, you know, dying is easy. It's living that's hard. Isn't that what they say? So it's, yeah, it's much more difficult to live. Huh? So I think, you know,
Oops.
All right, we have to stop now, right?
Okay, thank you so much, Sol. If you like, we can continue this meeting in another scheduled meeting in the future, if you wish.
Well, I would love to finish it. I have so many other charts to show.
Beautiful.
And of course, it's a very sensitive subject because I don't want to scare people, you know. I mean, I know how people, you know, what we carry on the inner levels in terms of fear of death, etc. So,
Exactly.
But I'd love to finish it.
Fantastic. Yes. I'll be in touch with you soon. So would you all please thank Sol Jonassen?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sol.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks.
It was very, very, just great.
Thanks, Sol.
Death is juicy, huh? We love death.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Ciao, ciao.